Billings up to Clark. Clark takes her first shot. Finds herself down low, kicks it out to Caitlin Clark. Clark puts it up. Getting themselves prepared for the World Cup that they've already qualified for, but really not letting their foot off the glass on offense.
The mainstream sports media has become a machine that manufactures approval, constantly working to protect the delicate egos of an outdated power structure. If you simply glance at the box score from this return game, listen to the polished press conferences, and follow the carefully controlled commentary, you are being handed a narrative that is both insulting and deeply misleading. They want fans to believe that placing Caitlin Clark on the bench to begin the game was a thoughtful coaching choice, a respectful gesture toward veterans, and a slow reintroduction after nearly 200 days away from the court. But that explanation is not strategy. It is organizational failure on a massive scale. What we truly witnessed was a desperate effort by the old political structure of women's basketball to delay the inevitable shift that is already happening in the sport. Veterans like Chelsea Gray were placed in the starting lineup not because they increased the odds of winning, but because the establishment is terrified of a reality that is becoming impossible to deny. Clark represents one of the most powerful and efficient forces the sport has ever seen. The moment she steps onto the floor, the value and influence of many veteran players instantly begin to shrink. After spending more than 6 months away from competition, recovering and recalibrating while the league attempted to move forward without its most powerful engine, Clark returned with an overwhelming level of dominance. Her performance wasn't simply a comeback. It felt more like a declaration, a reminder that the economic and competitive energy surrounding the sport now revolves around one player's presence. Take a closer look at the numbers. She produced 17 points.
To what Caitlin Clark is going to do in year 3, you know what? I don't blame Brianna Stewart, Brianna Turner, Nafisa Collier, Aneka Ogwumike if they say themselves, we can't get beat like this. This girl is coming for revenge.
12 assists and a staggering plus 35 rating in limited minutes. Those are not ordinary statistics. They function more like a financial report showing one entity completely dominating the marketplace. Achieving a plus 35 rating in a professional basketball game doesn't happen just because someone plays well. It happens when a player fundamentally changes the gravity of the entire court. Clark forces out defenses to react to possibilities before they even exist. She reads defensive rotations in the pick and roll faster than most players can even recognize the coverage. Her 12 assists are not simply acts of generosity. They are evidence of complete control over the spacing, movement of the half-court offense. In many ways, she acts like a master investor, taking teammates who struggle to create shots on their own and injecting them with opportunity. She delivers perfect passes for easy finishes, raising their shooting percentages and turning the entire lineup into a synchronized offensive machine. Considering that level of impact, the coaching staff's decision to begin the game with Clark on the bench resembles a major tech company locking its most advanced artificial intelligence in a basement because middle management is afraid the innovation might replace them. To listen closely to the tone of the analysis surrounding this performance, and you can almost hear the tension. I don't blame players like Brianna Stewart, Brianna Turner, or Nafisa Collier for acknowledging that they simply cannot allow games to slip away like this. What we are seeing is a form of psychological pressure that commentators rarely admit on national broadcasts. For years, the established superstars of the league carefully built their reputations and brand value, collecting awards and shaping the public image of women's basketball. But now, many of those same stars are confronting a harsh possibility.
Clearly the best player. The team, if you can believe it, looked night and day. Clark on the floor, Clark on the bench. Clark on the floor, ball's moving, pace is flowing, Clark on the bench.
The game may be evolving faster than their dominance can keep up. Players like Stewart and Collier are extraordinary talents who mastered the traditional style of the sport. They operate brilliantly within the established structure of the game. Clark, however, does not merely operate inside that structure. She tears it apart and replaces it with something entirely new. When other teams review film of this return performance, They are not simply searching for weaknesses to attack. They are witnessing a player who is absent for more than 200 days. Walk back onto the court without the slightest trace of rust, firing cross-court passes with speed and accuracy that defensive rotations cannot realistically stop. The message to the rest of the league is clear. The upcoming season is not shaping up to be a normal competition. It may become a dramatic shift in power. The opportunity to slow Clark's rise may already be disappearing. That reality also raises comfortable questions about locker room politics. How does a generational talent end up being treated like a secondary bench option? The starting lineup featured Chelsea Gray, whose career accomplishments are undeniable. But in today's high-speed, spacing-focused era, the physical pace required is dramatically.
You know what a real vet would do? A real vet would say, you know what? Here's my spot. I ain't competing with that. You know what? We're a better team if you take my spot and I try to fit in where I can get it.
Different from what dominated the league a few years ago, the media frequently argues that younger players must patiently wait their turn and respect the established hierarchy. But professional sports, especially at the highest level, rarely function according to tradition. In an environment where performance determines value, hierarchy often becomes a myth maintained by those who fear losing influence. True veteran leadership is not about clinging to a starting role based on past achievements. Real leadership means recognizing when the game is changing and stepping aside so the team can evolve and succeed. The contrast visible in this game was impossible to ignore. With Clark on the court, the offense looked completely alive. The ball moved quickly. The pace increased and scoring opportunities appeared from everywhere. With Clark sitting on the bench, the team operated in an entirely different reality. When the traditional point guards ran the system, the offense slowed down. It relied on predictable half-court sets that allowed defenses to reset and prepare. Everything became methodical and easy to scout. The moment Clark crossed the sideline and entered the game, the tempo exploded. Fast breaks became dangerous scoring opportunities, and the ball began moving with remarkable efficiency. Passes reached open shooters and rolling bigs. Before defenders could even set up their standard defensive formations, given such an obvious statistical difference, the coaching staff's continued attempt to justify a limited role for Clark seems almost unbelievable. Choosing locker room politics and public optics over clear offensive efficiency reflects a failure in leadership. History shows that this is exactly how large organizations collapse. They refuse to adopt new ideas because they remain emotionally tied to systems that once made them successful. If we examine the mindset of veteran players more closely, the situation becomes even clearer. Players like Chelsea Gray and the rest of the old guard understand exactly what is happening. They can see the floor geometry just as clearly as anyone else. They feel the atmosphere in the arena change when Clark sits down. The energy fades, the rhythm slows, and the excitement disappears. And the moment she checks back into the game, that energy instantly returns, raising the intensity in the building and reminding everyone how dramatically one player can shift the entire environment of the sport. Do you know what a true veteran would actually do in this situation? A real vet would step back and say, you know what? This is your spot now. I'm not trying to compete with that level of impact. That simple decision is the center of this entire conflict. Right now, many veterans are desperately gripping the steering wheel of a vehicle that is being launched into the stratosphere by an engine they no longer control.
Folks, this is why she wasn't on the team in 2024. They know she would have came in dominating. She would have came in wrecking-ish. And the story...
Instead of accepting the role of a stabilizing mentor for the second unit, they insist on remaining the centerpiece of the system, which leads to inefficiency, careless turnovers, and chaotic opening stretches of the game. The real disappointment is that the coaching staff appears unwilling to confront this issue directly. They lack the organizational backbone to sit down with veteran players and remove the authority they have been holding on to for far too long. In doing so, They allow the fragile pride of the past to slow down the limitless potential of the future. The moment Caitlin Clark finally checked into the game and ran a perfectly timed pick and roll with Monique Billings. It wasn't just another basket. It was a clear and powerful statement that exposed the flaw in the starting lineup. Decision. Clark makes the game appear almost effortless because she reads defensive schemes at a speed that many legacy players simply cannot match. Her influence spreads far beyond her personal statistics. The ripple effect of her presence completely reshapes the value and productivity of everyone sharing the floor with her. As soon as Clark began directing the offense, players like Angel Reese, Ryan Howard, Paige Buchers, and Camila Cardoso suddenly looked more dangerous and efficient. Take Angel Reese as an example. The media constantly tries to push the idea that Reese and Clark are locked in some bitter rivalry, framing their success as a zero-sum battle where one must fail for the other to thrive. But the actual footage of them sharing the court tells a completely different story. When Clark and Reese operate in the same system, their pick and roll chemistry becomes extremely difficult for defenses to stop. Clark's shooting gravity forces defenders to collapse, and she calmly floats a lob pass to a cutting Reese at the rim. It's a nearly unstoppable sequence. Clark essentially transforms Reese's physical rebounding style into a lethal offensive weapon by combining spacing, timing, and precision passing. Now add Paige Buchers into that same equation. When Buchers and Clark share the backcourt, the result no longer resembles a normal basketball game. It becomes a coordinated offensive orchestra. Defenders can't fully collapse on Clark's drives because Buchers is waiting outside for a deadly perimeter shot. At the same time, they can't aggressively trap Buchers because Clark is already relocating to launch a deep three. From a defensive standpoint, it becomes an unsolvable puzzle. Clark's presence dramatically increases the productivity of everyone around her, which makes the decision to keep her on the bench even more strategically irrational. And that brings us to the most controversial and uncomfortable truth surrounding this entire situation. What we just witnessed on the court is more than a preview of the upcoming season. It is a powerful confirmation of the controversial decisions that occurred during the summer of 2024 Summer Olympics selection process. For months, the basketball establishment tried to convince fans that Clark was excluded from the Olympic roster because she needed rest, lacked veteran experience, or wasn't fully ready for international physicality. But many observers now believe those explanations were carefully crafted narratives, meant to protect the reputation of the existing power structure. This is exactly why she was not placed on the 2024 Olympic roster. Many insiders understood that if Caitlin Clark had joined that team, the tournament storyline would have changed overnight. The selection committees and corporate sponsors feared that possibility more than anything. If Clark had stepped onto that international stage, she wouldn't have quietly waited her turn. She would have immediately taken control of the offense and transformed the entire dynamic of the team in front of a global audience. The decision-makers knew that if she played, the focus of the tournament would shift away from the collective achievements of established veterans and toward the undeniable arrival of a new dominant figure in women's basketball. The goal was not to protect Clark, it was to protect the legacy, a hierarchy that had already been built by leaving her off the roster. They attempted to slow down her momentum and preserve the narrative surrounding players who had been marketed for years. But forces like this cannot be contained forever. Eventually, talent and impact break through every barrier. Now the long absence is over, and the version of Clark returning to the court looks even more dangerous than before. The time for careful diplomacy and quiet negotiations inside locker rooms appears to be over. Right now, the coaching staff is essentially holding a lit stick of dynamite while pretending it's harmless fireworks. Every minute Clark sits on the bench represents lost opportunity, lost excitement for fans, lost strategic advantage, and lost economic momentum for the league. Everyone understands this reality. The fans recognize it. Opposing teams feel it. Even veteran players sense it during their most honest moments. The illusion of a strict hierarchy collapsed the moment Clark delivered a performance of 17 points, 12 assists, and a +35 impact, while barely exerting herself. You simply do not keep the most influential and marketable player in the sport sitting on the bench. just to protect someone else's comfort. You don't carefully introduce a generational predator into the ecosystem. You unleash it and force the rest of the league to adapt. The era of slow, methodical basketball built entirely around veteran dominance is fading away. The future belongs to speed, spacing, and the innovative offensive style that Clark represents. She doesn't merely participate in the game. She reshapes the entire marketplace surrounding it. Clark influences the value of every player sharing the floor with her. She shifts the rhythm of the league itself. And if the coaching staff fails to recognize that and place her firmly at the center of their strategy, they are not just making a poor basketball decision, they're undermining their own organization's future. The moment of reckoning is not coming someday. It is already here, waiting on the bench, ready to check in and completely redefine what the sport looks like. Ignore that reality, and the consequences will arrive quickly and decisively. The takeover has already begun. And right now, Caitlin Clark is holding every share of influence in the entire conversation.